physical trauma Jesus endured. We shouldn't take it lightly, that experience, because it was extremely painful. When you talk about just the flogging that he endured, Jesus was whipped with these whips that were intertwined with leather, with sharpened bones attached to them, and heavy weighted balls to make the whips even more heavy as they struck the accused. Jesus lost an immense amount of blood every time he was struck with that whip. His skin was ripped and his flesh was torn, and the inside of his flesh was exposed, and he was losing blood. And some people would go into hypovolemic shock in those situations because of the loss of so much blood. Some of the things they would experience is a racing heartbeat. The heart is pumping so fast, but there's no blood there. They could even collapse because of the low blood pressure. Some would even die right there. They wouldn't even survive. Their kidneys will shut down. So in conclusion, in saying all of that, I think it's fair to say that there's a reason for that extreme thirst. The other thing is that through this type of suffering, Jesus is fulfilling prophecy. In Psalm 22, chapter, I believe it's 19, he says, "My strength has dried up like sun-baked clay. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You have laid me in the dust and laid me for dead." Here it is, Jesus agreeing with Scripture, willing to fulfill that Scripture in the midst of his suffering. I think that agreement is crucial for us in our Christian walk. In Romans chapter 14, verses 7 to 8, it says, "We neither live or die for ourselves. If we live, we honor God. If we die, we honor God. So whether we live or die, we belong to him." And as proclaimed Christians, that is the mantle that we have accepted. Philippians chapter 3 talks about, I want to know Christ. I want to be able to acknowledge him or be able to identify with him through his suffering and become like him in that regard. And so something needs to be said for the passion and the thirst that we have, that Jesus had, even in enduring on that cross. The passion and the thirst that he had for the world to be saved, we ought to have that same passion and that same thirst. And I want to end with talking about the importance or the significance of the use of hyssop. In Exodus chapter 12, verses 22 and 23, you can find God giving Moses instructions to the Israelites to use hyssop, dip it into the blood of a dead goat, and spread it over your doorposts. And I think that's significant because they used hyssop to give that sour wine to Jesus when he said, "I thirst." Back then, hyssop was used as sort of like a purification. Even David said, "Purge me with hyssop." And I think Jesus' blood shed on Calvary can be like our hyssop in these times that we're living in now. And I want to read something that I wrote down that I think would close this out. This is just a final thought that I had. It says, "In Jesus' thirst and subsequent drink of sour wine with hyssop on the cross, let us be reminded of the state our sin leaves us in. Sin smells bad and it tastes sour. It signifies Jesus' willingness to take on our sin, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. The price we were supposed to pay because of our hardness of heart, disobedience, and rebellion against him, we no longer have to pay, because he did. Thanks be to God who always causes us to triumph in his name. Thank him that he is willing to demonstrate his thirst in ultimate suffering, but also for his thirst for the world, through his love, could be saved from its own destruction." Jesus saying, "I thirst," is, to me, he's mustering up the last bit of strength that he needs to make his next declaration.